Hello, my name is Owen Martin. I'm from Troop 4018, Greenfield, New York, and I'm working with the Veterans Breakfast Club to interview veterans as part of my Ego project. Here I am with Mike Tisi, you served in the U.S. Navy, right?
That is correct.
So could you tell me a little about your service and yourself?
Sure. I'm from the Mohawk Valley originally, born in Ilion, New York. Dad is from Little Falls, New York. Mom is from Frankfort, New York. So that's where my family origins are. Let's see, graduated from Little Falls High School in 1978. Wasn't too sure about what I wanted to do as far as studies afterwards at that point, and all I ever did was work in restaurants as a teenager. So I thought, well, you know what? I think I'll join the service, just like my dad and several of my brothers did, and go from there. And since all I ever did was work in restaurants, I decided I'm going to stick with what I know and went in as a cook. So that's what a mess management specialist is. It's basically cooking for the crew where you serve. It also involves training in some cases, ordering supplies, things of that nature, taking care of the officers. We serve the officers in what's called a wardroom. That's pretty much throughout the Navy. Any ships or submarines that go to sea, the officers are served by the mess management specialist in a what we call a wardroom environment, which is basically a more formal sitting room.
When did you join?
I joined in 1978.
Okay. And when did you leave the service?
I left active duty in 1982. And at that time, you gave what was called a 6-year commitment, which was 4 years active, 2 years inactive reserves, 4 years active duty, and then 2 years inactive reserve. So I was, honorably discharged in September of 1984 upon completion of the 2 years inactive duty.
All right. What was your experience like in the service? Was it positive or negative?
It was very positive, very positive. There was opportunities to learn. They were, you were given many opportunities on like the submarine. If you wanted to say qualify helmsman, plainsman, which would these are the guys that actually drive the submarine. You could do things like that. You could qualify other things like torpedo men of the watch, things like that. I never really pursued it. I took a little interest in sonar. I did a little bit of learning in that area, but pretty much focused on the work I did. My supervisor got me involved in the training of my co-workers, so I did things like that. Now, something that's very important that you may already be aware of is that all folks, everybody that serves on a nuclear submarine has to get qualified. They call it. If you ever see the dolphins, that's what that indicates they're submarine qualified. You have a year from the time you report to duty to qualify for submarines. So you spend that first, well, up to a year. I think I did it in about 10 and a half or 11 months. But you're very, very in depth studying the entire submarine construction, so you have a working knowledge of everything.
How many vessels did you serve on?
I served on a total of 3. I was on the USS, initially out of submarine school. I was on the USS Tullabee, which is an older nuclear submarine commissioned in 1959, decommissioned in 1988. I was on that for, I only made one actually sea run on it to Bermuda, and then it went into the shipyards to have an overhaul of the reactor. So I spent the next probably a little over a year in the shipyards up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, while the submarine was being overhauled. And while I was there, I made E4. I advanced E2, E3, E4. And shortly after making E4, a cook that was on a submarine that was deployed in the Indian Ocean, his enlistment was up. And so he got out of the Navy, and my boss came to me and told me, pack your sea bag, you just got transferred. I said, where am I going? Well, he goes, you got transferred to the USS Groton, which is on deployment in the Indian Ocean. So I basically had to fly halfway around the world to meet the submarine that was tied up to a submarine tender. Submarine tender is a ship that submarines tie up to when they're on deployment. They take on stores, they might take on some repair parts, things of that nature. So So I had to fly to this little island called Diego Garcia, which is it's basically it's very isolated in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and I basically flew into there and took the small boat out to the submarine, tied to the tender, and then I spent I was on USS Groton for the remainder of my submarine time.
Was there like difference in training between each one?
It was pretty. I mean, the focus that first year is basically qualifying submarines. So I was in the process of doing that on Tullabee, but I basically got transferred before I completed the qualifications. It was also very difficult on Tullabee to qualify because it was tore apart. The inside of the submarine was literally tore apart. So you had to, I mean, you could get things done, but it just took longer. It just took a lot longer because you just couldn't, you just couldn't put your hands and actually visually see things that you were studying on because many of these things were just removed. So, but yeah, it's sort of similar. I mean, the submarines are different. They're different because there's different classes. Even to this day, if you see it all, or know anything on it, they're all different. So there's going to be little changes from sub to sub. So.
Did you have a favorite?
You know, they both had their uniqueness to it. I mean, the older sub, I can tell you, you can actually find this online. It was the only one of its kind that was made. They only made one, so one Tullabee, and so it was unique in that at the time, very quiet when it was made. When it was commissioned in 1959, it was extremely, very, very quiet for the standards for that time. Whereas USS Groton was what's called Los Angeles class submarine, which all these subs were named after United States cities, starting with the Los Angeles, and then it went on from there. So that one was a very, very up to date sub when I got to it. It was only 4 years old when I got to it, so very state of the art. They're still active to this day. The Los Angeles class submarines are still in service at this time. So can't really say I had a favorite. They both just kind of had their unique qualities to it. I worked with some amazing people. They were just, the technology that goes into these things is just mind boggling. And these guys were experts. They were all experts in their field. So, you never really felt concerned because, these guys had everything under control very, very well. And just having a working knowledge, that gives you an extreme amount of just, confidence when you're, out there for extended periods of time to see that, everything's in good order. So.
Yeah, I interviewed another mariner, and he served on the USS Skipjack, and he said working on the submarine is one of the smartest crowd you can be around, and the crew he liked a lot. He had a system of blue and gold crew. Was that similar with you?
No, there's two types of submarines. You got the blue and gold crews are the ballistic missile submarines, the fleet ballistic missile submarines. So if he probably got into, there was the whatever crew was out, they were out to sea about 70 days. They would come in for 20 days of a workup, then they would turn it over to the gold crew. And then that was the cycle per se. I was on a fast attack submarine. So fast attack submarines, where the ballistic missile subs are more about deterrence, that carrying these these ballistic missiles that, can do hit targets from great distances. Fast attack submarines are about anti-submarine warfare. So that's what they're all about for the most part. So different missions, basically.
Was your submarine able, what is it? I forget. I'm sorry. What are some of your greatest experiences on the submarine? Funny stories, something like that.
Let's see. Well, I can tell you probably the greatest memory I have was we were pulling out of Perth, Australia. This would have been 1980, maybe 81, somewhere in there. And I always wanted to go up into the sail, which is the top side. You ever see that portion that sticks out, the top part of the
Yeah.
sub? While the submarine's on the surface, they're up there, navigating. You've got an officer up there, you've got a lookout, usually 2 to 3 people up there. And I always wanted to be able to just see what it was like, So I asked permission and it was granted. So I got to go up topside into the sail, and it was nighttime when I went up there. And the thing that was really cool about it was very, very warm. It was March, so their seasons are reversed down there. So that was summer, down in Australia. So it was very warm. And the cool part about it was when you looked over the bow of the submarine, it was nighttime. Picture it being dark. You could see what's called plankton breaking over the bow of the submarine, and it looked like kind of like lightning bugs, just sparkly, lighting up the water, breaking in front of the submarine. It was just amazing. So that was a pretty cool memory. So another funny one, you'll get a kick out of this, is that as a cook, you did basically one of two things. You were either cooking during the day, which we worked 12-hour shifts. You were either cooking from like 6 in the morning till about 6 at night, or you were night baking from 6 at night till 6 in the morning. Those were our shifts. So while we were night baking, sometimes we'd have things in the oven, cakes or whatever, right? And it never failed. It always seemed like somebody told people up in control that we were baking things, and they decided that they were going to change the order of depth of the submarine. So just picture this now. The submarine is going to do this kind of stuff if it's going to say, go up a little bit in depth, or it's going to tilt downward to go, submerge farther. Well, when that happens, you can just imagine what happened to that cake sitting in the oven. Because the cake did this, and when we would pull it out of the oven, instead of being a level cake was kind of like this, or like this, depending on which way they went. So it never failed. They used to do that to us. So funny things like that. So trying to think of what else comes to mind right now. Give me some time on that. Can I go back to that?
Yeah,
later?
yeah.
Okay.
How was the food without chef's bias?
The food was pretty good because they're allotted more per crew member than surface ships. So we used to give the guys literally like beef Wellington, or like a beef tenderloin and lobster tail about every 6 weeks. We used to we had that on board, and plus they always had food 24 hours. We had these refrigerators set up that had tuna fish in them, peanut butter and jelly, just things that they could make. If they wanted to make a quick sandwich or whatever, they could do that. We always had that available. And the other submariner might have mentioned that there are, and this may be the same for surface ships, there's actually 4 meals while you're at sea. I don't know if anybody else mentioned that to you or not, but there's 4 meals. So you get your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then they have what's called mid-rats, which is kind of like a midnight meal per se. So, and that generally consisted of the kind of stuff we had pre-prepared. We would have things in there that they could make a sub sandwich, or things like that. So, or sometimes it'd be a little more, more like a regular meal. So, but overall the food was pretty good, and I will tell you that no matter how good you cooked, in most cases you never lived up to a crew member's wife. I mean, you could only do as good as you could do. But if you did well, they'd let you know, and if you did less than well, they usually let you know that too. So they were pretty fair like that. So.
Did you manage to get a lot of sleep?
Yeah. I mean, when we were in a regular, cycle of things, you're working a 12-hour shift, you're pretty whipped. So, the first year you're spending a lot of time studying. So I would immediately dive into the studies after getting off of my tour, and I'd probably be a couple hours at that. So, a little bit of downtime to read. But I got my pretty consistently 8 hours of sleep, I would say. Yeah, no problems at all. The only time we didn't get to sleep was occasionally we would be drilling. We would have drills at sea, and we would be up. Pretty much the whole crew would be up as needed, basically, for these drills. So you didn't get a lot of sleep for those.
Are there any particular gross submarine stories that happened?
Oh man, I could tell you. I actually have photos. I'll have to maybe round up a few for you. So I don't know if any of the other any other Navy guys you've spoken with, Navy veterans or gals, but when any ship crosses the equator, they have what's called the shellback initiation. Anybody tell you about that?
Yes.
Okay. So shellback initiation is going to be pretty gross, probably no matter where you cross the equator or what ship you're on. And the submarines, I made shellback on USS Groton, and I have the photos to prove it, and it was pretty nasty. So I don't know how much you want me to get into it. It's not like terrible, but it was pretty nasty. I mean, I can elaborate if you want me to.
Yeah, Dominic was telling me about his. You can say.
Sure. So on a submarine, the first thing they did was they had us all. These are all the the non-shellbacks. Now, basically, everybody who's already crossed the equator does the initiating. So if you haven't crossed, you're now going to get initiated into the shellback. You order the shellback. So on the submarine, what they had us do is they had us line up in this corridor that was kind of like off to the side of the reactor, but quite a ways away from it. It's basically access to the engine room. It was like a corridor. And we entered that corridor, and they basically hosed us down first. First thing they did was they hosed us down with like regular fire hoses to clean us up, I guess, for what was going to happen. So, and from there, once we got to the end of that, they blindfolded us. and then they had us kneel down and crawl. And what there was all in our cruise mess where we basically have our meals. They had put down all kinds of nasty food, and it was just really, really bad. And they're throwing food on us as we're crawling through this stuff. And oh no, wait a minute, I'm sorry. They had us blindfolded when they hosed us, and then they took them off when we started crawling through the stuff. And so you're known as a polywog basically before you're a shellback. So they're calling you a wog. They call wog as a short. So you're crawling through all this like nasty food, and they're like heaving flour on you and just all kinds of stuff, yelling crazy stuff at you. And so the last thing you had to do after you crawled through all this stuff was they had this rather portly crew member that they called Buddha. And they had a bedpan. If you can picture a bedpan in a hospital, sitting down. He's sitting down, and you're crawling up to this. Or you had to crawl up to this guy, and they had put a maraschino cherry in the middle of his belly, in his gut, basically. And he had this bowl of like slop. It was food, but it looked nasty. And he was spreading it on his belly and stuff. And you had to pluck the cherry out. And I have a picture of this. It wasn't me, but if you dropped the cherry, if you didn't get it, it fell into that bedpan, and you had to get it out of there. If you so, and it wasn't what would normally be in a bedpan. It was food made to look like that, basically. So, I managed to get through the thing, but by the time I got to the other end, the first thing I had to do was go to the bathroom and hurl. I threw up bad. It was just disgusting. So that was the shellback initiation on USS Groton. I mean, if you want pictures, I could I have pictures of that. I could probably send it on to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
A few other pictures too. I have a few, and I'm sorry I didn't get them to you beforehand. I actually have a few pictures of. I have one picture of USS Tullabee when we pulled into Bermuda that I could send you. I have pictures of USS Groton. We had a swim call at one time, and so we had a bunch of guys up topside. We're having a little swim call. So yeah, so I have things like that I could send you.
Would you do it again if you could?
Yeah, I would. There's even, in all these times that we're living in right now, I'm sure I'm not the only veteran that feels like it would, if I could go back, I would go back in a heartbeat. We're too old now. I mean, there's an age limit to the time you could serve, but yeah, I would do it again in a heartbeat. It was actually a good opportunity to, grow as into a young man. I mean, there was a lot of responsibility from, going from high school to, serving in the service. It gave me a good opportunity to grow up. It helped me a lot in my private sector work. And I also finished out my professional career as in the U.S. Postal Service. I was a postmaster. And so that federal time, when you're working for the federal government, they'll allow you to buy back your military time. In other words, add it to your service time. So I was able to do that. And it's always a great I don't, there aren't that many submariners in the grand scheme of the Navy as a whole. There really aren't, the percentages are not very high. So I'll go years without meeting a submariner. I like to wear a hat. As a matter of fact, if you got a second, let me go grab it. Can I
Yeah,
grab
sure.
my hat? I'll be right back. Okay, thanks for your patience. So, yeah, so I'll wear my USS Groton hat sometimes when I go out and about, and been a couple occasions where I've been able to either meet somebody who served on subs or had a relative that did, which has been always fun. So,
What inspired you to join?
I'll tell you what happened. I was actually in my cooking school. When you say join, submarine service or the Navy in general?
Both. You can do what comes
So
first.
I think I told you, as far as joining the Navy, not sure what I wanted to do after high school. Did not have, this was 1978. Wasn't a lot of work basically available for kids, period. So it wasn't like I had a lot of money saved up for school. So I mean, I went in the Navy because there was just, didn't see the need to go into college. If not, I wasn't sure about what I wanted to do. And there was also, like I think I mentioned before, the draw of, my dad having served in the Navy, two brothers that served. So that was kind of part of it, as far as actually joining. And then as far as submarine service goes, I was in my cooking school out in San Diego, California. This was in early 1979, and they had a guy come in and talk about the submarine service to the class. And the thing that stuck out for me, and this was really the main thing that joined it, it sounded interesting, but the main reason I went was that I knew the closest base there was to upstate New York was Groton, Connecticut, where there are submarines. And so now there's no guarantee you're going to get where you want to be, because in the service, it's all based on the needs of the government. In other words, they're going to place you where there's a need, but they allow you to put what they call a wish list together, where you can write down 3 places you'd like to be stationed on subs. So of course I put Groton as my first choice, and it worked out. I ended up getting Groton, so I was able to get home a lot, which was nice. That was the big draw for me as far as subs. It was mostly just to be able to get close to home and be able to get home on occasion.
You said your father and brothers both served. Does your military family extend more than that? Like, have you guys always been in the military almost?
You mean like as far as other like uncles, things like that,
Yeah.
or? Yeah, yeah. I had uncles that served in World War II. Actually, I got to think about this. All my uncles served in World War II, actually. So, yeah, there were other relatives that served. As far as other family members, brother-in-law, brother-in-law that's a Vietnam veteran. My oldest brother's a Vietnam veteran. My father-in-law, he didn't serve during an actual war, but he was in the Marine Corps. So, he actually got to do something recently. I don't know if anybody's mentioned this to you, called an honor flight. Has anybody mentioned that, or have you ever heard about that?
No, I have not.
So honor flight is, it's basically I think it's a private organization. It's nationwide. And they basically give opportunities to veterans, especially like older veterans, World War II era, Vietnam, Korean conflict, the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and take in all of the memorials. And they fly them, or bus them, depending on how far away they are. They basically, from the minute they leave their home, they are treated very, very well. There's like people waiting at the airports, people waiting at the memorials, just thanking them for their service. It's quite an amazing thing. So that might be worth if you're doing other interviews, to see if anybody else has done that, because it's just really something. I might be able to send you, if you'd want, a picture of my father-in-law doing
Yeah,
his honor flight.
sure.
So, but it's really something. So, yeah. So I hope that helps. I mean, as far as other family members, yeah, aunts, uncles, and my father-in-law, and let's see, I'm the youngest of 8, so I have 4 other brothers, and all served except for one. One in the Army, One of my brothers, my oldest brother, actually, he was in the Air Force and the Navy. So he kind of an interesting story there. So yeah, so
Do you remember any really difficult days from training or service?
difficult days for training. Well, I'll tell you, when you're in submarine school, they put you in a simulated tank where they're setting off leaks in pipes, and it's basically the kind of thing where you've got to work as a team with everybody around you to stop these leaks. And the water's basically, picture this now. It's like a tank basically. So the thing's filling up with water. So you've only got so much time to basically, get the job done. Now they're not going to drown you, obviously, but if it gets to a point where you haven't got it done, they're going to shut down the water, and they might critique you on, what you might have been able to do to stop it. So there was a big time crunch, to be able to stop leaks basically. And what they're doing is they're simulating a scenario where if there might have been a breach in the hull or something like that. I mean, think about it. A submarine, if it were submerged, does not have a lot of time to respond to something like that because the sea pressure being so great. So that's kind of what it was all about, was just to be able to act quickly and as a group collectively to put a stop to leaks like that. These
Do you
are
rec-
more really hull leaks. I mean, they weren't like the exterior of the hull. That would be more like if something internal, you had a breakdown and all of a sudden you had, water leakage, what you could do to remedy it. So.
do you recommend young people joining the military today?
It's certainly there's a need. I mean, there's needs everywhere. I mean, people are gifted in different areas. So your dad was an engineer, just an example, and that's something that you're doing strong in the sciences and the maths and stuff like that. Well, hey, then that's going to be the path you might take. I mean, it may be through a military academy or an officer's candidate school. I mean, that helps pay for it, and pays for it in full in I think in all or most cases. But as far as anybody that was not sure perhaps of what they wanted to do with their life at that point, it certainly is a great opportunity to grow as an individual. You have an opportunity to travel, which was all very enticing to me. I got to see different parts of the world. So, there's a lot of pluses to it. And it'll also help you, if you don't make it a career and say, you finish out your enlistment and go into the private sector, a lot of people like seeing that on a resume that you served in the military. I had several of my bosses in the private sector before the Postal Service were in the Navy, and they saw that, and that is something that stood out for them. So.
What were some of your favorite parts of the world you saw?
Wow. So let's see. Perth, Australia. Perth, Western Australia was just an amazing place. They made us feel very welcome when we got there. The cool thing about submarines is that, and this works, no matter what country you go to, or if another Navy is visiting your country, is there's usually a host submarine when you get there. In other words, there will be a crew there that's going to kind of set up, activities for you guys to do, or it might be something as simple as running a meal over. Like we had a British submarine pull into the shipyard up in Portsmouth one time when I was up there, and I was able to bring a meal over to them. And of course, when I got there, now this is kind of funny. On our subs, there isn't any alcohol at sea. There just isn't any. But you have different cultures. Well, on the British submarines, the guys, I guess, that were below decks, they weren't like drinking a lot of anything, but they weren't going to let me out of the sub without having a one alcoholic beverage. So I had to do that just because they were expecting me to do that. It was a cultural thing. So that was kind of neat. And then, chatted with them a little bit. But when we went to Perth, Western Australia, we had a host submarine there. And And so what they did, this was pretty cool, is did you ever see the movie Animal House, or ever heard about it?
No.
Okay, this came out about 1978, and it's a bunch of guys at college and doing crazy stuff. And one of the things they did was a toga party. You probably don't even know what that is, do you?
No.
A toga. So a toga party is basically people that are going to a party, and they're dressed basically in a sheet. Pretty much is what it is. So it might sound kind of nuts, but what they did was the host sub there, they called it the first Australian American International Submariners Toga Party, and they invited a lot of gals to this thing, and it was just something cool, that we had an opportunity to do. And it was kind of nice after being in the sea for a long time, just to see a lot of people, and it was a nice social event. So so that was some of the fun things. They were also just very, very kind people. We met some really, really nice people in Australia. They were people our age. Some of them are older folks. I think it has to do a lot with in World War II, we had a lot to do with the Australians from getting attacked by the Japanese. We were able to save them from some serious issues. So I don't think they ever forgot that. So that is just something that as far as hospitality went, they were probably right at the top. So I liked Halifax, Nova Scotia. That was another one that we went to. That was on USS Groton. Also very, very, people were just very kind, people that we met and everything there. So, oh yeah, Bermuda. Bermuda was beautiful. I mean, it was only there a few days, but it was just very, very nice. Someplace I'd like to get back to one day. But those are probably the ones that stand out. I didn't really get to a lot of ports because we were at sea a lot. The submarines were, the fast attack submarines are at sea for, extended periods of time, and the deployments are long. I can tell you, like in 1981, was it 81, 80 or 81? Might have been 81. We were at sea over 200 days of the year.
Wow.
We were at sea. So I think it was like 220 or something like that. So yeah.
Do you still talk to any of your friends in the service?
I'm in touch with one. I'm in touch with one friend that is from Ohio originally, and he's doing well. It was kind of interesting. My friend, he was also a cook on USS Groton, and he as a kid was a beekeeper. He did that with his dad as a hobby, and after he got out of the service, he ended up making a business out of it. And so he basically raises bees. He has them in Ohio in the warm months, and then he packs everything up and takes it to Central Florida in the winter and keeps everything going, as far as the honey production and all the stuff that goes with having beekeeping. And he basically has built it up to the point where he sells these products to wholesalers and smaller businesses, and he's done pretty well for himself like that.
Are there any like lessons you learned in the military that you still live by?
Probably the most important thing I would say is just to, whatever it is that you're doing, and doing it to the best of your ability. This is something that they really, really push hard. There's an expectation. There really is a high expectation, and because it's a cohesive type thing. Nothing, unless everybody's doing their part and doing it well. No matter what kind of a command you're talking about, there's going to be vulnerability. And so there's a high expectation that you do what you do, that you're there on time, and that you're ready, whatever your duties are, to perform them. So I've always tried to carry that through in all my work, after getting out of the military. So
I don't have any more questions. And if you want to tell more funny or gross stories, feel free.
funny stories in the military. I didn't give it a lot of thought before we started talking, but let me see if I can think of something. Let me think. I got one this is kind of funny. When we were in Nova Scotia, we had a guy. Yeah, excuse me, my cat wants in. She's banging on the door, so
All right.
So we get to Nova Scotia, and we had a guy on the sub that was of Scottish descent, and he played the bagpipes, and he played them well. He played them really well. And so it was always fun when you would get out with this guy, because if you were, if you were out with, the crew that he was out with, we would get somewhere and we might have dinner, or, we might have a beer or whatever. At that time, you could, some of the places you went, the age was different back then. So, well, he would have these bagpipes, and he would just break them out and start playing them. He would just break them out and start playing them. And of course, in Nova Scotia, and I don't know if there was a lot of Scottish people or what, but people were going nuts. They were applauding, and they wanted to have more. And so what ended up happening was, people first, they were sending over like some hors d'oeuvres or something. They were like buying stuff for us, and then they bought us all, I think, a round of beer or whatever. So, but it was just the coolest thing, because no matter where you went, if you were like at the table with this guy, oh man, it was like a spectacle. So so that was kind of fun. Trying to think of what else here. Funny stories. Let's see. Oh, I guess this one's kind of funny. Okay, so we're we're at sea on the Tullabee now. This is the Tullabee, and I'm in there cooking. I'm in the kitchen area making food, and one of the things I was doing was cooking. I think I was cooking French fries or something, and I don't know, whatever else. I was preparing other parts of the meal, and I had taken the basket of French fries and had, I had made some, and then I had taken some out of the grease and had set them on these a couple little lips that the basket sits on. Well, in my haste of doing whatever else I was doing, I had only caught one of the two lips that it's supposed to sit on. And I think in moving around the kitchen, because there's not a lot of room, I bumped the basket of French fries, and it fell back into the grease, and the grease went like this, and it got me in a couple spots in my face. Now I wore glasses, so thankfully my eyes were okay, but I had a couple spots on my face. So so for the rest of the deployment, they called me Spot. Just crazy stuff that, things we had to do, stuff that just for humor, just to kind of keep our wits about ourselves. So so that was just kind of goofy stuff. Oh, I got this. I just thought of another good one. One of the deployments on the USS Groton, we were coming through the Panama Canal, okay, and on our way home. And so we entered the canal early in the morning, and I was night baking at the time, so I had gotten off my shift at 6 a.m. So and we were just starting to go through it, and they were telling everybody that if you're going to be topside, in other words, if you're going to be up on top of the submarine going through, taking in the sights, do not stay up there for any great period of time, because the Panama Canal is very close to the equator. So you got all those direct sun rays coming down on you. And so I had just, like I say, gotten off my night baking of 12 hours, and I went up there. Now remember, a submarine's black, so it's drawing the sun rays on top of the fact that you got direct sun rays, so it's dark color. So I went up there, and I'm taking in the sights, and it was beautiful. It was a nice day. It was warm, and but I was a little tired, and I had laid out a towel or whatever, and I think I might have had a little pillow, and I ended up falling asleep for 2 hours. I slept for 2 hours in the direct sun, and when I got up, my crewmates looked at me saying, "Man, you are not going to be in good shape after this." And so sure enough, I ended up getting some blisters and stuff like that. And the crazy part about the service is that if you do something like that, they still expect you to work. There's no like, getting a break from work. You still got to do your work. So I learned an important lesson that day about making sure not staying out in sunlight and those kind of conditions. So, but anyways, I think that's about all I can think of right now.
All right. Well, I'm done if you are.
All right.
Thank you so much for your service, and thank you for your time. This interview's been great.
All right, Owen. Well, thank you again, and I commend you on this adventure that you're doing with the with interviewing the veterans, I think it was a great idea. And I wish you the best, and I will, I hope that your Eagle, Scout thing will be recognized as you progress in your life. I'm sure that it will. I have a friend that was, and I know that you mentioned that it's something that employers like to see as well. So I commend you for that.
All right. Thanks again. Have a nice night.
All right, Mike. All right, you take care now.
Yep.